All right, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon. Welcome. It's good to see you all. My plan had been to incorporate the Mentimeters into this, and that technology just is not working for us today. So we are going to do full room discussion as much as we can. I think the room's small enough. We also have a microphone. If you have a question, we'll have a time for questions at the end, but if something comes up that you really want to ask about in the moment, please don't hesitate to flag me down and ask a question. But I am grateful that you are here. Welcome to those of you in this room. This is also a hybrid workshop, so welcome to our friends online as well. We are very grateful that you're here. I cannot see them right now, but maybe we'll be able to bring them up a little bit later. My name is Kirsten Traxel, and I bring greetings to you from St. Andrew Presbyterian Church in Denton, Texas, where I serve, my home church there. I also bring greetings to you from the Center for Excellence in Christian Education, housed at Union Presbyterian Seminary, where I'm on staff there as well. I'm the project manager for an upcoming Lilly grant called Font and Faith that we are very excited about. There are flyers for that on your, not for the grant, but for our upcoming symposium on your tables. Hopefully those of you that have been down in the marketplace have stopped by the booth and talked to us about that, but we are interested in engaging educators, clergy, parents with children, intergenerational families in conversation about what your needs are. We know things are changing in the Presbyterian Church as a denomination as far as our resources and our curriculum. And so the center is moving forward with the understanding that we can hopefully fill some of those gaps, but we need your help. We need your conversations, your ideas. So please stop by the booth. If you are able to join us for the symposium in March, either in hybrid or in person, we would love to have your voice as part of that conversation. So there's my shameless plug for the center. But today, we are here about a different subject. When I first heard the theme for this year's conference, you start thinking about what you're wrestling with. And for me, at this time last year and still now, that subject was confirmation. And by the number of people that were interested in this workshop, I am suspicious that maybe you are wrestling with confirmation as well. So I need to be upfront with you that my experience is in the Presbyterian Church USA. I am a cradle Presbyterian, so those of you that are from different denominations, we are so glad you're here. I am not going to be able to speak to your practices, but I hope that you'll find nuggets of information and resources within this presentation that you can use, and certainly we would love to learn from you as well, because there is a wealth of experience that we can share with each other. As I said, there will be a time for questions at the end, but don't be afraid to flag me down. People who are online, our online friends, I keep looking here like they're going to be here, but online friends, please use the chat, and Christy is being wonderful to facilitate the conversation there, and she'll let us know if there's something that she can share with us from the online community. Okay. Now, will you please join me in a moment of prayer as we enter this time of wrestling together? Lord, we gather in this space in gratitude for the opportunity to have these conversations, to be able to seek greater understanding, and to have your and each other's help on this journey. We want to be better for our learners and for ourselves as we seek to share you with our young people. Thank you for being here with us today and for this annual event where we can connect and be rejuvenated in our service to you. And all God's children say, amen. So as I mentioned, I have been wrestling with confirmation. I'm going to give you my backstory. We'll have a time to maybe share some of your story as well. A couple of years ago, after quite a few years of serving as a Christian educator, I was in the middle of my MACE degree program at Union Presbyterian Seminary. And part of that degree was to serve an internship. And my internship was going to be served in my home church since I was a remote learner. And our church confirmation class was experiencing some tensions. And so I was asked, as the intern, to write a new curriculum and to try to address those tensions. And those of you who write curriculum, which I know there's quite a few of you, that's no small task, right? So let me show you what the elements of our confirmation program were at that time. So 8th grade, and I'll just let you take a minute and go through all that because that's quite a bit. I don't want to read the slides to you. So the struggle that was happening was that the youth, almost unanimously, not everyone, but to a large part, strongly disliked, to say it friendly, certain aspects of the confirmation class. You can probably guess what they didn't like. They didn't like the daily assignments, okay? They said the class felt a lot like school. They were somewhat uninspired. It had become a task to get the students to complete their at-home assignments. We had actually brought in an adult helper for the class whose job was to keep track of those assignments and to track them. And so some of the parents were unhappy because their children were unhappy. And this had been going on for a few years. And so it was time for us to revisit the topic, to look at this, to discern, to think about what we needed to do to make this more vital, to make it work for more of our students. Another issue that had come up was that we were seeing not a large number, but a certain percentage of our students were just not interested in joining the church for a number of different reasons, many different reasons. And that is not a requirement of confirmation by any means that you have to join the church. But obviously we hope. We hope that they will want to join our community and be with us. So there's some disappointment there. Parents get a little stressed out. Negotiations start with the child. You know, what can we do? What can we do to help you want to join the church? And obviously sometimes that works and the child says okay. And sometimes the youth says okay. Sometimes it just wasn't going to happen. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Let's go this way. Someone asked, were we going to get a link to the slide? Yes. Right now, do you want a link? Oh. Give me one. Can they see the slides online? Okay. I will be happy to share the slideshow at the end. Does that sound like a good idea? I will email it out to all of you and all the resources as well. I would love to be able to do that for you. So the solution that we reached, as I mentioned, was to come up with a new curriculum. Now, we all know that we can't wave the magic wand of curriculum and solve all of our issues, okay? We hope for that. We know that curriculum is a very important part of what we do, of our teaching. It gives us resources, but it's just not a magic wand. It's not going to fix everything that's going on all the time. So I knew that if I was going to write a curriculum, I needed to have a bigger picture of our confirmation, of what was needed, what the expectations were, what we hoped and dreamed for the program. And so that's what I set out to do. And what I'm going to share with you today is the process that came together that led us forward, that is leading us forward, because we are still just in the first year of trying something new. We don't know even at this point if it's the right way yet, but we are trying new things, and I'd like to share that with you today and share the process so hopefully you can take some steps of your own and use some of the things I've already done and not have to repeat them for yourselves, okay? So that's my backstory. And that's what brought me here to you today. And I'd like to have a chance for you all to reflect and share on your backstory. So for those of you who have been confirmands, what do you remember? What stands out about your confirmation experience? If you feel comfortable sharing, feel free to turn to your table and share a little bit of your stories. We're not going to take too long, maybe 4 or 5 minutes to do that. But what stands out most? What did you bring away, or what do you remember still today about your confirmation experience? If you have not gone through confirmation, you might share what your experience was in whatever denomination you were in, how that process worked in your denomination as well, so we can learn from each other. All right, so take a few minutes if you would like to share with each other. And online participants, if you would like to share amongst yourselves in the chat room, and then if you want to share out loud as well, we can do that. Okay, we're going to come back together. We will have other times to share. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know there's amazing stories out there. Thank you. So let's do a quick visual poll, all right? So our online friends, Christy, are you able to see them? Or maybe, can we bring them up right now? No? Okay. 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 Online friends, if you would like to participate in our poll, will you turn your cameras on, and then Christy can help us see you as well. So, raise your hand if what you shared at your table was a good memory, something that was a positive in your confirmation experience. Raise your hand. Okay. Was it a good memory? Okay, good. All right. There's our, yay, we can see you. I love it. Okay, lots of hands. All right, hands down. Raise your hand if it was a bad memory, something that was negative for you. Okay. Okay, thank you. Raise your hand if joining the church was why you did confirmation. Okay, I'll raise my hand for that one. Okay, online. Great, okay. Raise your hand if you feel that your confirmation experience has had a direct impact on your life of faith today. Okay, a few hands. All right, thank you. And raise your hand, this is the last one. Raise your hand if you remember feeling closer to God during your confirmation experience. Do you remember that? Okay. A few, just a few. All right. So when I began researching confirmation, I formed a visioning team to help me dream about what confirmation could be and look like in our context. I asked that team questions exactly like the ones I just asked you. And you know, it's really interesting that none of us could remember if we felt closer to God during confirmation. And there were just a handful of hands here in this room as well. We all remembered some special people or pastors that were part of the experience. Special experiences, like if we went somewhere special or our class took place in a special location, we remembered things like that. I remember that I had to memorize the catechism. At the time, my pastor seemed very, very old to me. He might have been, I'm not sure now. It seems like it. But we memorized the catechisms, and we had weekly tests. And I remember that other students cheated on those tests. And as funny as that is, it's like, is that really what I remember about confirmation? You know, I remember more, but that stands out in my mind. Our classes were focused primarily on content and factual learning. And my goal was to join the church because I loved my church. And I was like fifth generation in my church, and I wanted to join that church too. So I did what I needed to do to join the church. Yeah. I wrote my faith statement, I took the tests, I joined the church, but I cannot stand here today and remember how I felt about God or my faith, other than I knew it was who I was, and that's what I wanted. So how many of our young people still do that same thing today? Okay. How many are completing a task because it's the year that they, quote unquote, do confirmation? Okay. We hope that while they are doing confirmation, that they're getting more out of it. But I don't think that's probably good enough. It's not good enough for me, and I'm sure it's probably not good enough for most of you, or you wouldn't be here today. And I'm going to go out on a limb and propose that confirmation is really about the journey, the personal experience, the learning that takes place and keeps going after they complete the confirmation experience. It should be more. And it has to be more than the outcomes that are listed in the Book of Order, which are another lot of words. Many of you probably know this already. And again, I'm not going to read it to you, but I'd like you to take a minute and look at it. And I do need to state right now that I am not anti-Book of Polity. I am a polity nerd with the best of them. I love the structure, but there's things that we need to talk about. Did you get to the end? Pretty close? Okay. So, what do you notice about the order of events according to the Book of Order? What comes first? Louder? Baptism. When those who have been baptized are ready to make a public profession of faith, then they are to receive instruction. So, what age are they to be confirmed? When they are ready, according to the Book of Order. Now, I know that many of you have thought about what age is best for confirmation. A lot of research tells us it's about the middle of high school-ish, okay? The problem is that no one age will fit everyone. And what happens when our youth get to high school? They're busy. And often before high school, right? They're busy, and it's hard. We just see less of them because there's such a demand and stress on their time, okay? So a lot of us do this in middle school. 8th grade is our year. How many of you do 8th grade? How many of you do younger than that? Okay, a few. How many of you do older than that? Okay, we've got a good mix in here. A little bit. Early high school? Okay, late high school? No one late high school. Okay, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. So some of these young people won't feel ready until they're adults, or they might never feel ready, because we also know that they, what happens when they graduate. A lot of them don't choose to find a church home in college, and we hope that they do. We hope that they come back to the church on their own, in their own lives, but we also know that a lot of them don't, okay? The other point I want to make from the Book of Order is that confirmation is not the instruction. What does it say? What is confirmation? It's public profession of faith and accepting the responsibility of life in the church. The instruction is part of the list of things that make it possible for you to be confirmed to join the church. And we're going to talk more about this in detail in a moment, but somewhere along the way we started calling the instruction part confirmation. Right? We could just call it confirmation. We have them wrapped both up together, the instruction and the polity of joining the church, into one single thing. And I believe that is a mistake for several reasons, but mostly because it has created an expectation that young people who may or may not be at a point in their faith journey where they can claim their faith are put in a confirmation class because the church's schedule says it's time for them to take confirmation. We give them a list of tasks and lessons they need to accomplish in a prescribed period of time, and at the end of that time, we say they should be ready to join the church because they have taken confirmation, rather than when you're ready, be confirmed, as is stated in our polity. Now, I am not saying that there are not youth who are ready for membership and have a personal relationship with Jesus at the prescribed time, but I am saying that this model of confirmation often is flawed and is failing to be what we want and hope for it to be. Have any of you experienced the failure in this process? I see some nodding heads, some knowing smiles, right? Okay? That doesn't mean we need to throw it all out. I don't believe that at all. But let's see what we can do with it. So I've had some guides that have helped me as I have wrestled with confirmation. One of those is Dr. Richard Osmer. Dr. Osmer is a minister, a Christian educator, a practical theologian. Now retired, he taught at Union Presbyterian Seminary and Princeton Theological Seminary. And he has done considerable work on the topic of confirmation. He laid out an extensive history in his book, Confirmation, Presbyterian Practices and Ecumenical Perspective from 1996. Okay? So back in 1996, he wrote, and I will read you this one. The contemporary practice of confirmation is in serious difficulty. In large part, the inadequacy of these programs is due to their inability to address certain conditions that have been created by the processes of modernization. Features of modernity such as institutional and cultural differentiation, rapid social change, and technological innovation have made it very difficult for the older practices of catechetical instruction and confirmation to work. Of special importance in this regard has been the advent of adolescence, a whole new stage in the life cycle. By locating confirmation prior to the psychosocial work of adolescence, contemporary churches, for all intents and purposes, define it as an aspect of childhood or early adolescence faith and not as an act of Christian maturity. Not only has this proven to be ineffective at a practical level, but it is questionable theologically as well. And this was back in 1996. Okay? We'll just sit with that for a second, right? Have we made much progress? I don't know. Some of us have. He goes on to trace the origins of confirmation back to the 2nd and 5th centuries. I'm a kind of a nerdy person. This was kind of interesting to me. Confirmation was developed as part of the liturgical elaboration of the baptismal service. By the Middle Ages, Aquinas and other theologians portrayed confirmation as a sacrament, as a way of communicating the grace to take up the struggle of the mature Christian life. It came to be viewed as the culmination of a catechetical educational program enabling individuals to make a confession of the church's faith on the basis of their study of the catechism, and during the same period of time, a professional understanding of confirmation emerged that was focused on the individual's claiming of the baptismal covenant through personal profession of faith and a pledge of obedience to the church. Does that sound familiar? Okay, that was way back in the Middle Ages. Okay. Osmer goes on to trace a decline in catechetical instruction in the 19th century due to the Sunday school movement and changes in religious education. So, if we're struggling today, I don't think it's our fault. This all happened a long time ago, these changes, and we are still living with them and practicing them today. It's a little sobering to me. Now, Osmer goes on to say that the Presbyterian Church and other denominations have been in a period of confusion about the practices of confirmation for most of the 20th century. And now, here we are in the 21st century, almost a quarter of the way through it, holding what remains of an ancient practice that has failed to innovate with the dawn of adolescence, which, by the way, adolescence was identified as a life stage in 1904. So we might just be a little bit behind. Okay. Now, here's where we were going to do a Mentimeter, but that code's not going to take us to a slide, so you don't have to worry about that. But let's pause for a moment, because I want to make sure you know that I don't want this to be a negative conversation about confirmation. There are so many beautiful, wonderful, amazing experiences and important things that we do in confirmation. So a negative view is not what I want to, it's not my intent of this at all. So before we go down this path, I want you to turn to someone at your table and tell them what you love about confirmation. What is your most favorite thing about confirmation or favorite experience? Just take a couple minutes, not too long. Go ahead. Okay, so now we're smiling. Maybe we're tearing up with a really wonderful memory or someone we have taught. We've remembered why we love confirmation, because there is so much to love about this time period in young people's lives, about guiding them, about opening opportunities for them to be part of the body of Christ as a member. There's some really wonderful things. So now what? Okay. How do we enact positive change? How can we meet our young people where they are in their faith journeys and support them in a way that affirms them, excites them, rather than stresses them or burdens them or pressures them to claim a faith that they don't feel they're ready to own? How can we do what we're doing during this precious time that we have with them? How can we do this to help them grow into a faith that will draw them to church community throughout their lives, not just during that 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Okay, so this is what Osmer suggests. Confirmation should be separated from catechetical instruction. So separate the learning process from the polity of joining the church. Number 2, establish a new practice of biblical catechesis in conjunction with the teaching of a doctrinal catechism. So middle school classes could be focused on an overview of the narrative structure of Scripture rather than the isolated bits and pieces that we tend to teach our children, the isolated stories, but have an overall arching biblical Scripture narrative taught in middle school. And also teach the doctrines and basic beliefs of the church, which is what we tend to do and we hope we do during confirmation. And then number 3, offer a more complex form of catechetical instruction to those who have chosen to enroll in a confirmation class. So a process that will lead to profession of faith and church membership, and the individuals choose when they are ready to enter confirmation. So we make confirmation the act of joining the church that is chosen at the time of the individual's choosing, separate from instruction. And I don't know what would happen in your context, but when we had this discussion at my church, I'm smiling because my pastor's sitting here, my youth leader's sitting here, and they know what this discussion was. We didn't feel like this could be done for us. This wasn't what we chose, okay? And rightfully so, right? I had been asked for a new curriculum, and I was saying, hey, let's blow the whole thing apart into separate parts and try something new. And that's hard. That's really hard, and especially when we don't know what will happen, okay? But it became abundantly clear to me during these conversations that a new curriculum would only be a Band-Aid on the wound that was what was starting to break in our confirmation process. And I knew confirmation was just one piece of the change that we would need to make to be more fruitful for our youth. So before I could even think about curriculum, I needed to ask an important question. How can the process and intent of confirmation be structured and taught in a way that will provide meaning and build discipleship based on what we currently know about adolescents and their faith development? So in other words, what do young people today need to give them a faith foundation that addresses their life experiences today and will carry them into their future lives? On your table are handouts, and if, like I said, if you sat in the back and you don't get them, we can pass them back. There were more seats in here than what I planned for copies. Anybody need one? Raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. The first page has a blue banner at the top that says current confirmation process, so that's where we start. Online participants, my understanding was that these would be in a resource section on the app. I have not been able to find them, so I will email all of these out, but hopefully you can see from the slides and follow along, and we will make sure I send those out to all of you as well. Okay? This handout shares the process that I have taken to reimagine confirmation in my context with a lot of help from people in my church. I hope it will be helpful to you or be something you can take back to your church and at least utilize some of these ideas. So step 1, we start with 4 essential tenets of confirmation with the help of Dr. Osmer's book. Okay? So, step 1, confirmation should be a distinctive moment in an unfolding journey of faith, not the end of our journey, okay? It should hold relationship to both baptism and the Lord's Supper. Those who are baptized and participate in the Lord's Supper as children can claim the covenant in which they already participate. It should include clear liturgical and educational practices that will mark the individual's corporate confession and personal claiming of the covenant. So if this is not how confirmation functions in your context, then this is what we should hope to reclaim, okay? It was determined that my church was not willing to go as far as what Dr. Osmer suggests and completely separate catechetical instruction from the act of confirmation. You'll have to determine what's best in your context for your youth. I do recommend that you take step 2 either way on our handout, and at least on paper, separate the two. Separate confirmation into what I like to call the process of confirmation, the instruction, and then the act of confirmation, which is joining the church, according to the Book of Order. Okay? So analyze each according to the 4 tenets in step number 1 that Dr. Osmer suggests, and make sure that something hasn't slipped in that completely detracts from the process and the act of confirmation. That's where we start. Okay? Then step 3 is when we really start digging in and thinking about innovation and creativity and how we need to reshape our confirmation processes. I highly recommend forming a visioning team of interested and invested church members to support you and help you dream these dreams and be part of this process, to generate new ideas, to invest in the process that you come up with so that they can be your advocates as you try to do something new or integrate new ideas into what you're already doing. Okay? Your team can also help you gather information, and if we're going to bring confirmation into the 21st century, we need to know what's going on with our youth today. We can't imagine what's next without knowing where we are. Okay? We have to address the big elephant in the lives of our young people, the fact that they are post-pandemic adolescents. They have lived through an event that had an enormous impact on them personally, socially, developmentally, you name it. It was affected. I did a lot of research and reading on this topic, and today we'll talk about a few of the resources that stood out and were most helpful to me. The Boys and Girls Club of America publishes a new youth survey every year. This survey looks at a wide range of behaviors and topics, and for my purposes, I focused on areas that reflected how young people approach learning, new ideas, volunteering, and organizational membership. The 2024 survey findings are taken from more than 140,000 kids and teens ages 9 through 18 from diverse populations. So it's a wonderful resource for wrapping your head around how youth and children are thinking. So here's some insights from the Youth Right Now survey from this year. 7 out of 10 youth, about 69%, say when something important goes wrong in their life, they can't stop worrying about it. And 66% of youth say they try to keep people from finding out about the problem. Nearly half, 48% of youth say that they don't understand something right away, they stop trying to understand. Okay. 35% say some of the time or all of the time when they have trouble doing something, they give up. 19% of young people don't believe they can make a difference in their community. And 19% sounds like a small number, but that's almost a fifth of our young people. So what might this tell us about confirmands? Faith may be an even steeper slope for these youth than past generations. The mystery of the divine may be really hard to come to terms with simply because these young people are more likely to give up on those difficult ideas. And almost 1/5 of U.S. youth do not think a life of service will make a difference in the world. I also looked at several studies about post-pandemic mental health. The most fascinating article was from the National Institutes of Health in COVID-19 research. Researchers comparing pre- and post-pandemic adolescent brain scans found these brains had aged faster than normal during the shutdowns, about 3 years during the 10 months of shutdown. This premature aging is similar to changes that happen in the brain of teens who experience violence, neglect, and family dysfunction. Prematurely aging brains can correlate with depression, anxiety, and addiction in the future. These findings highlight the serious struggle that young people experienced during the pandemic and how it may continue to affect them into their future. An article from the Pediatric Research Foundation published in May of 2023 reported that increased screen time in elementary-age children, which are now our middle schoolers, our confirmands, has contributed to developmental delays, learning disabilities, and behavioral disorders, and was associated with higher odds of reporting suicidal behaviors in ages 9 through 11. I also wanted to understand how young people might feel about membership in churches. And the closest I could get to data for this was to look at the current results from Gallup polls. This is the historical trend for confidence in institutions, and specifically these are the trends for confidence in church or organized religion. In 2024, the data shows that only 32% of Americans have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in churches and organized religion. That has fallen from 62% in 1983. To look at this another way, almost 70% of Americans only have some, very little, or no confidence in churches. And we know that our parents of our young people influence them the most in these areas, in their understanding of these areas. So here are some general understandings we can take from this research. Today's confirmands are likely to place less value in organizational membership than previous generations, often stop trying to understand if understanding is not reached immediately, and may show continuing symptoms of the trauma they experienced living through a pandemic. Does this mean that confirmation will not hold meaning in their lives? Absolutely not. That is not what I'm saying, but as educators, we know that we must teach in a way that is relevant and meaningful to our learners. We cannot proceed as if the adolescents of today are the same as they were decades or even 5 years ago. We must find ways to reclaim what we intend confirmation to be by understanding that past methods may not produce the same outcomes as we move into the future. And think back to how old some of those methods are. All right, so my next step was to learn more about confirmation processes in order to discern what changes needed to happen in my own context. And the best source for information that I have found on a wide range of confirmation processes is the Confirmation Project. Are any of you familiar with the Confirmation Project? A few hands. Good. Okay. So the Confirmation Project started in 2014, and the book Cultivating Teen Faith: Insights from the Confirmation Project was published in 2018. It is the largest study of confirmation practices ever undertaken in the United States. It was spearheaded by Dr. Osmer and friends, his educator friend Catherine Douglas. It was a 3-year multi-denominational research project that studied a national sample of young people, parents, and youth pastors from 24 confirmation projects. These programs were considered some of the strongest in the nation, viewed as quote-unquote effective by their denominations and church leaders. And this research looked at the structures, motivations, understandings, and practices of the programs and those involved in them. So let's take a look at some of the findings from the Confirmation Project. Okay. They identified 4 dimensions of confirmation. Design. So successful confirmation processes were custom designed. One size does not fit all. And they were adaptive to each particular context. Leadership. Each of these programs was led by a faithful and committed leader or leaders. Ecology. Confirmation is one aspect of a larger learning, discipleship, and a communal whole, so not an isolated program existing without the larger body. And curriculum. Good news, right? Which turns out to not be as important as the relationships that grew around that curriculum. Okay? So the Confirmation Project identified 9 sub-themes under those 4 dimensions. Number 1, confirmation matters. It needs committed and faithful shared leadership. Meaningful confirmation takes relevant and real programs. It has faith-forming ecology. It has a Christian community that makes an intentional commitment to inquiry-based learning with and across generations. It should be adapted to each local context. It is a Christian foundation for public life, and it usually involves a public rite of faith or affirmation at the end of the process. For Presbyterians, we know that is a faith statement, a public faith statement, and membership in the church. So, Armed with all of this knowledge and research about current young people and best practices in confirmation, it was now time, I felt, to survey the youth in my own church, to see how they perceived their confirmation experience. I surveyed youth from the past 2 years of confirmation classes, as well as their parents and mentors. I also asked questions about membership, volunteering, and a wide range of behaviors so that I could make a comparison with the national data that I had accumulated. So here are some of the highlights from my surveys from my context. Okay, the question on this was, my faith and relationship with God grew through the confirmation process. 33% were neutral. 25% agreed, and 33% strongly agreed. Okay? Confirmation was relevant to my confirmand's faith journey. So this is the parents and the mentors commenting on their youth's experience. 50% of the parents agreed that confirmation was relevant to their faith journey. Okay? That's the good news. But there were a couple in there that strongly disagreed. The mentors, 40% were neutral. They weren't sure. 40% of the parents agreed, and then another 20% strongly agreed. So just interesting to see. Gave us an idea of where they were. I regularly shared my faith and faith story with my confirmand throughout the confirmation process. So these are the parents. Did they talk about their faith? Regularly. 62.5% disagreed. Okay. That was sobering to us. I spent time in prayer and personal reflection during confirmations. This is the young person. Okay. 33% were neutral. Only about 17% agreed. 17% strongly agreed, 25% disagreed that they had spent time in prayer and personal reflection. Okay? So we learned a lot. And this is just, I made a long survey, people. I love my research. So there were a lot of questions. We learned a lot from this process. Yes, go ahead. Okay, yes. So this would have been a pool of about 20 youth, 18 to 20 youth. Okay, and then their parents and mentors, so you're talking about 3 times the number of adults involved. Yeah, so not a huge pool, because we only did 2 years. We felt it was important to look at post-pandemic, because we knew from national data that pre-pandemic would have had a different experience and been in a different headspace. Yeah, okay. All right, so we learned quite a bit. It was invaluable to me as I started thinking about the future of our process and what kind of curriculum might be effective. And my visioning team, our pastors, our youth leadership, and I thought about this research and the young people in the church, and we realized that our issues were running deeper, okay, than just parents and youth who were unhappy with the time commitment and the workload of the confirmation class. It was about more than those assignments, more than just taking a test, okay? We realized that we had wider issues. Go ahead. So at that time, it was just 8th grade, okay? One of the early slides, you may not have been here. Just 8th grade, I can send it all to you. They were doing daily assignments, they were doing a lot of written things, a lot of reflection. There was a good amount of time commitment from them, okay? About a school year, 9 months. Yeah, we start in September, and we usually have confirmation Sunday in April. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay. So we felt that there were some unmet learning style and developmental needs in our students. The adult-mentor relationships, the feedback we got from our mentors said that they weren't working. They weren't connecting. We weren't giving them an adequate space to really to form a relationship with each other. Okay? Youth and their parents rarely attended worship during confirmation, and attendance declined further after confirmation. Youth desire a youth group experience that entails little overt faith formation or participation in the greater church. They like their youth room. They like to be there. And maybe some of these issues also resonate with you. And I'm sure you can add more to the list. Okay? After the research feels adequate, and you feel like you have a better understanding of what is going on in the lives of your youth, then it's time to move on to step 4, where we get to discern and dream. Okay? And I have found a metaphor that really helps me from the book Cultivating Teen Faith Insights from the Confirmation Project. This is really helpful. The metaphor comes from 2 of the book's contributors, Kenda Creasy-Dean and Catherine Douglas, and it uses the image of a prism. And I'm sure you're all familiar with prisms, a clear crystal with multiple facets, and they are beautiful just as they are, but when a clear beam of light enters a prism, what emerges is truly beautiful. The prism refracts and separates the clear light into the spectrum of colors that make up that light, resulting in a rainbow. Dean and Douglas suggest that confirmation functions like a prism. It is multifaceted, and as divine light shines, as God's light shines into the lives of youth, confirmation should refract that light into a rainbow of God's love and purpose. When the refracted light emerges from inside these young lives, it is different than when it entered. Let's think of the prism as the confirmation process. The light is God's work in the life of each individual. When God's light shines through the confirmation process prism, what should result is a spectrum of faith that will carry a person onward through a life of discipleship. The act of confirmation, that professing of faith and church membership, is part of that resulting rainbow we hope our young people will exit the confirmation process with. Okay, we hope they exit with a desire to be part of the body of Christ. Does this always happen? No. However, if our process is functioning well, the young person will still exit the confirmation process with a wide spectrum of understanding, of experience, and relationships that will continue with them on their path to discipleship. So, friends, we know that faith is out of our hands. Only God can handle that. But that prism, that is something we can work with, right? The process. We can set our young people up for some success. Okay, I invite you to go ahead and take, in that packet, there's a sheet that has a prism on it. I would like you to turn each of those rainbows colors, each of the colors of the rainbow, into an aspect of your confirmation program. What are the things you do in confirmation that will produce a spectrum of faith experiences that each young person can carry with them? Okay? For example, our confirmation process, and probably yours as well, has class learning, right? We got to teach that doctrine and those beliefs, those foundations. So that's one of my colors, is the in-class learning. Okay? We also do service projects, mission work. So that's another one of my rainbow colors. So take a minute or two here to think about your process right now. And if it's God's light is shining through your young people, what is their prism producing in their spectrum of faith? What are the aspects of that process that should produce those colors? Online folks, I know you don't have this, and I will get it to you. I apologize. Maybe you can go ahead and make lists of your own, just looking at the slide. And I'm going to go ahead and put mine up, and as you write yours, I'm hoping we'll have new ideas and new things that you do that I don't do. Some things to think about. And these are very generalized, right? Areas that we want to teach into. Does anyone have anything different than what I have that you'd like to share? I'd love ideas. Yes, go right ahead. Embodiment. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Inviting us to get out of our heads and into our bodies and talking about the importance of having a body in faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be done in multiple ways. I mean, and I think really embodiment identities sort of is the hug around all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, we're embodied, right, when we are doing our prayer practices. We're embodied when we're doing our service projects. But yeah.
I love that line. Yeah, so for those who couldn't hear, so she said embodiment is being aware of our physical presence, the things that we do, taking it into outside of just our heads. Yes, go right ahead and back.
Community belonging.
Community belonging. Yeah. It seems to be raining on our roof. I'm not... I thought there might be a few levels above us, but maybe not. Oh, is it the air coming on?
Thank you.
Oh, I like the idea of the rain so much better, but okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. I said community belonging because sometimes there is expectations of our kids, children, and I think the church has put those expectations before those kids are already even loved and cared, which that's why I think there's this kind of, I don't know if I should use the word hesitancy from kids to become members.
We're asking a lot of them.
Exactly.
Sometimes, or it
So
can feel like that. Yeah.
there's some underneath expectations that sometimes the kid have to do this. But I think belonging, and I think that goes in general for the church.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're so focused on membership, and I think I know some churches are transitioning of those terms, friends, or you are with us. It's not necessarily you member, but you are not.
Well,
right,
it's a
those
natural,
kind of things.
Yeah, it's natural for us as our churches may be losing membership to get a little desperate to really hope and put a lot into our expectations and hopes into our young people that they will stay with us. Yeah.
Yeah, what really means to belong.
Yeah.
Without
Yes.
expectations.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Anyone else?
Just tying in with embodiment, thinking about incarnation, and then practices, incarnating practices that you have, I guess, is prayer practice. But just thinking about self-care with all of the enormous stress and anxiety, that those could be tied with embodiment and practices.
Absolutely. We called our new curriculum Imago Dei because I wanted a big focus on the image of God and that we are beloved to God because of the mental health issues that we know our young people are having today. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? Something different? Yes, go ahead. You want?
Maybe this is what you mean by faith experiences, but going to visit other traditions.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, I guess the way that I phrased, and this incorporates a lot of what you have, is just like but giving them the language to name and express things. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for that. I think there's probably a lot that we could put into this. There's a lot you can put underneath each of those general topics up there. A lot of variance there. And all are, again, it needs to be tailored to your context. So yours should not look exactly like mine. Or what's inside of those beams is not going to be exactly like mine because you are different than me, right? So when you're looking for a curriculum, make sure that you are able to adapt it or add to it or take away what is not going to be relevant to your young people in your process. Yeah.
Everything on there relates to adults and adults' relationship to faith.
You know, what we're teaching in confirmation is kind of the foundation of faith, right? Not just kinda, it is. And I think we're going to see here in a second that what we found is you can't just only take it to the youth. Yeah, yeah. So at this point, it was time for us to take off on number 5 on our process handout. Yay, we've made it to the bottom, so exciting. It's time to draw some conclusions, make a plan, and see what comes with implementation of that plan. And I had so much help, and you all should get so much help because this is big. It's a big deal. I had the help of my church pastors, of the youth director, as well as the visioning team that I mentioned earlier. Does that mean that we did not have any pitfalls or roadblocks? Does that mean that we're not still wondering if we're doing this right? We are absolutely still wondering, and we should never stop wondering. We should always keep looking at what we're doing and keep it relevant and going. Don't be afraid of setbacks. I would say differing opinions. Some people are going to say, you want to do what with confirmation? This is a beloved institution in our churches, right? It should end in a certain way on a certain day with a certain pomp and circumstance. And so don't be afraid, right? That's why you need that community and that help in your discernment. Some people to be cheerleaders and to also help you sell it, to explain it, to educate the congregation why you're doing what you're doing. Okay? Having those tough conversations helped me to come to a deeper understanding and also gave wonderful insight into the ways that confirmation is so deeply personal to each of us. And some of our conclusions from the research led us to understand that many of the facets of our confirmation prism were not completely developed. Without solid foundations and scaffolding in place in the lives of our children, in our children's program, they were entering confirmation as adolescents unprepared for that deep dive into their faith that we were asking of them. Okay? So to put it plainly, our children and families have holes in their church education. And it's not because we don't have a wonderful education program for our children in our church. But things change as we settle in, as we do things repeatedly. Sometimes things slip through, or we need to educate our teachers differently, add some things in. So we started by looking at our children's program for some of the things that we're hoping to have eventually bleed into and grow into our confirmation process. Okay? Some of those things were Bible skills. We had just gotten away from some of those things, really making sure our children were using their Bibles, that our teachers weren't just reading the story Bible to them every week, but they were using their Bibles and knowing about Scripture. Our children have big questions that are not always being answered. And this is, like I said, not because that we offer a wide range of faith formation, really, really great programs and opportunities. But it's always good to take a step back and look at it again, okay, regularly. What we may be seeing is the fact that what has worked in our church for the past 2 decades just isn't quite what we need today. Okay? Again, our young children are also post-pandemic children, and they were affected by what was going on, whether they realized it or not, whether they were old enough to understand it. Okay? So it's time to take a step back, reevaluate how we teach and engage our children before confirmation is even in the picture. And perhaps even more importantly, how we empower our families to engage in at-home faith formation, right? Back to that survey data. Our families, our parents of the confirmands were not sharing their faith stories with their children. And they should be sharing their faith with their children from the beginning, not waiting until confirmation. Okay? Elizabeth Caldwell, who is here at the conference, I'm always so happy to see her, writes, in Leaving Home with Faith, in families where faith was important, it became like a tapestry, woven into their way of life and home, and in their commitments to participation in the life of a faith community. So I believe that there is a deficit of this kind of faith interaction in the homes of my context. And I also believe it has a direct impact on the confirmation process. Research tells us that parents are the most important and influential mentors for faith in their children. So we have made changes to our church's education ministry. We're focusing more on those Bible skills and other enrichment that may have lost its place in the Sunday school curriculum. We're doubling down on efforts to empower our families in their at-home faith formation skills. And it's going to be a few years before we reap the benefits of what we're doing in our children's ministry at the confirmation level. But I am hopeful. I'm always hopeful that these changes will help our confirmands be better prepared for their confirmation journey. We also made a list of needed improvements in the confirmation process, and some items on the list were already in place, and others were new ideas and ways of implementation. And you should have a bookmark on your table that has these things on it. Identifying needed change is an important first step. It is also important to note that change does not and should not try to happen overnight. Make a plan and proceed intentionally, prayerfully, and with the help of others. Some of you do not have oversight of your children's programs. It's going to take some conversations to talk with the other people in your church. Some of you are the only person, and you are working with all ages, and so you want to look at all ages, all of us, and see what we can do that will help our confirmation process. Okay? We believe changes across our educational ministries, from children through adults, can help strengthen and reshape the confirmation experience. That includes reshaping other classes and processes in the church. All right, so if you look at that bookmark, there's many things that can fall under each of these topics, but just a few of them. Empowering families at home. You could have parent classes to help them learn about at-home faith formation. You can have intergenerational events where we learn together. Help those parents learn their God talk. Talk to your children in faith language. Some of that has been lost, I believe, as well. Our parents just don't feel comfortable. Maybe they weren't raised in the church. Maybe they weren't raised in the same church that they're now worshiping in. Help them to have the tools they need to feel comfortable talking to their children about their faith, because that is going to have a huge impact on their lives. Experiential learning. Modern learning modalities, digital spirituality, project-oriented faith formation, field trips, those wonderful experiences outside the church walls, those all could fall underneath experiential learning, and there's many more. Intergenerational relationship building and mentorship. Boy, I wish I could figure out a way to form a mentorship relationship when they're young that can stick with them all the way until they graduate and beyond. That takes a commitment. It takes people staying in one place for an extent and a length of time. There's a lot of barriers, but what can we do to get close to that? What can you do in your context to help those relationships form in a safe way within child protective policies, obviously, but a way that draws the generations together and helps grow those relationships, pew buddies, making sure your older generations are still active with your children's ministry. Okay, those are big ideas and not easy things to do. None of this is easy, I hate to tell you, friends. But one step at a time, right? One step at a time. Relevant content that is applicable to the lives of today's youth. That goes right back to that research that we have. Focus on the individual's interests and calls. Help them develop and feel a call to the body of the church to serve in the church and not just feel like the church is expecting things of them, but help them to find a call and a place within the church. We call some of our young ones young theologians, which I love. Help them to think of themselves as having the wisdom to be heard in where they are in their faith and sharing it with the older generations. Okay? Identity building, we talked about this kind of, that mental health aspect. You are a beloved child of God. You are made in the image of God. Okay? Those are ideas that need to be in there so deep that when they have a crisis, they can fall back on them. Okay? Affirming baptismal identities, okay? Opening doors to lifelong discipleship, addressing those multiple intelligences. So many of our kids are on the spectrum, are in different places than past generations. How can we teach to them? Because they are beloved children of God. Okay? So you can take that bookmark with you and ponder those things. What are some great ideas? I know you all, there's a wealth of experience in here, and you all will have wonderful ideas. I went back to our original list of quote-unquote problems, areas that needed to be addressed in our confirmation class, and we implemented changes that I hope will address those issues. The ones with unmet learning styles, the new curriculum was written for those multiple intelligences and learning styles. We try to use technology, digital spirituality tools, maybe not every week, but every now and then try to draw some of those young people in. The adult mentorships, adult mentor relationships that we're failing to form, we've revamped that a little bit. Our mentors come in and out of the classroom a lot more often now, and they are welcome at all times, and that's the way we've approached it, just giving them more time together and more opportunities. We reshaped our child protective policy, had kind of scared us from doing individual things too much, and so we're trying to encourage some group things. It's not necessarily working real well. Our mentors, it's hard to get together in groups, and it's hard to find time with multiple kiddos, but we're encouraging more communication and more frequent communication. The youth and their parents that rarely attended worship, more focus on worship ideas. We can't force them to be there, but we're trying to make worship a real focus, a real encouragement that this is a joyful expression, that this is our work that we do in the church, so come and worship. Again, it's going to take time to shape that. Our youth that desired a youth group experience that had not too much faith, they didn't want to be challenged too much faith-wise. We implemented a parallel learning program or a model in our youth Sunday school. We have confirmation service projects that overlap between the confirmands class and the senior high and into the adults. We're trying to do more intergenerational things so that they're not siloed. And then the youth are all together, working together, and hopefully finding some purpose there in that. I scaled down the assignments for those that just felt really overwhelmed by how much work. We're trying really hard not to have busy work. We're making everything really relevant. We encourage the mentors to be involved in that aspect of it and the parents to be involved. And we did that as well in our parallel learning, which we're going to talk about here in the next slide. We expanded our confirmation class to include 3 years, okay? So we're doing middle school as confirmation. So we're not just getting one crack at it. We're hopefully getting 3 cracks at it, 3 years. We do not do the same curriculum every year, which means there's a whole lot more writing to do and a whole lot more things. But there are so many great curriculums out there that we can cherry pick. Right? Oh, I loved this lesson in this curriculum, and this lesson was really great in this curriculum. Tailor it to your setting. Okay? And so we're doing 3 years with all the same topics, those tenets of faith that we outlined in our spectrum, but trying to meet them in different ways every year so that the youth have multiple experiences with each of the learning areas. Okay? This also provides, in our context, more of a critical mass for confirmation. We just don't have as many kids, as many youth in that age range right now. There's just 2 or 3 per year. And so by putting them together, we have more of a critical mass for activities and things like that. Our mentors interact with everyone in the class, not just their assigned mentee. They do have an assigned youth in 8th grade that they're going to help follow through the process, but they're also interacting with all the ages, and I think that's going to help with that relationship building. Yeah, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, you just said 3 years. You don't mean the program is 3 years. You mean the age?
The process is for 3 years now. We're not just doing 8th grade, we're doing 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They're all learning together, which changes the learning a little bit because 6th graders are in a different spot than 8th graders mentally. But we're hoping that that repetition will help with their learning and their understanding. They are in the program for 3 years. And it's in Sunday school for us. It's our Sunday school class. We don't do it outside of the Sunday school hour. So that's a little different. I would love to have, a couple hours every Sunday afternoon, but that just does not work for our families right now. So our compromise is that we turn the middle school Sunday school into confirmation class. The younger ones aren't maybe doing quite as much. They might not have the requirements for service the same way that the 8th graders do, but we have them all in there together. We just hope that that makes for a better learning environment. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. I I think that was it. Any other questions about that slide?
Is there repetition year over year, the same
Not the same curriculum.
graders might have gotten it?
The sixth graders are getting the same thing the eighth graders are this year. Next year, we'll rotate it, but the same concepts, just approached in different ways. Yeah, it's going to be a 3-year rotation. And we haven't gotten to those next 2 years yet, but we're going to get there real soon, planning that as well. I'm feeling that Bible skills are a deficit in these youth that we have right now. So one of the years is probably going to take a real scripture-based approach to confirmation. And then we'll do it a different way the next year. Yeah, go ahead.
Start a 3-year program, you have some eighth graders.
Exactly. And they have the opportunity to join the church. We call that is the culminating year. If it's the right time for them, yeah. They have the same choices, opportunities they've always had as eighth graders, but we're starting sixth and seventh graders with them. So our sixth graders will have been in there for 3 years. Our seventh graders will have been in there for 2 years. Yeah, if that kind of makes sense. Thank you for helping me clarify that. Any other questions? Yeah.
So basically that means that all of the youth in your church who participate in middle school, Sunday school are receiving the content of
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The eighth graders that started this year, are they getting?
They're only getting 1 year.
Everything that's in your curriculum?
They're getting the new curriculum, and it's their 1 year.
Cover the whole curriculum in 1 year?
Yes,
You just do it every.
that's the plan. It sounds exhausting right now because I'm just still finishing up that first curriculum. But like I said, I plan to look back at really successful curriculums or curriculums that have really nice things in them and kind of pick and choose for one of the years. And then, we have the old curriculum still too, which was not a bad curriculum. It just, we felt needed some revitalization. So between all of those, and I have a team. I'm not a standalone educator in the church. Some of you are, and I have been that standalone before too, and that can stand really exhausting. So find some help, find some co-teachers. In my context, I'm not the only teacher. The pastors rotate through. Let's look at that parallel learning model, and that might help you understand a little bit too. This is in your packet as well. So we implemented this parallel learning model, and this visual is hopefully will kind of help you understand what we're doing. We are in the process of implementing this in our church this year. Our high school Sunday school class mirrors the confirmation topics. I send the curriculum to Stephanie, our youth leader who teaches the high school class. Those students have been through confirmation, so it's a review. Again, why wouldn't we want to help them move their faith and continue their faith forward? So we're reviewing these topics, but in different ways. They've never done my curriculum, right? So Stephanie takes it, she adapts it for them each week, or she uses whatever she feels will work out of it for the high schoolers, okay? A review of the topics. Then the high schoolers, it gives them a chance to, they're the ones that did not join the church, that are still in high school Sunday school. This will hopefully give them a chance to revisit and decide if they're ready at a later time because they're getting the same topics again. We'll see. We don't know how that's going to work yet. We also formed an adult class that mirrors all of the confirmation topics with their parents. And it turns out the parents weren't the only ones who showed up. This has perhaps been the most successful part of our parallel learning model is this parent class we formed. We asked the confirmation, the 8th grade parents to attend. The other parents, the 6th and 7th grade parents, have been attending as well, and some of the young children parents are coming in because they were curious what was coming up. Some of the mentors float through. Some of the people who come to that class have no tie to confirmation at all. They just like the group of adults. And they are doing the same curriculum as the confirmands, and you would not believe all the questions, all of the revisiting, some of the parents hadn't gone through confirmation. Some of them weren't Presbyterian. They are getting this for the first time, and they are getting the same thing that their young person is talking about, and so they can go home and have a conversation about the exact same topics together. And they are made aware of every assignment we're asking of those young people, and it's keeping them in the loop on a weekly basis. Yes?
These classes, the adults and the...
So it's an adult, an interested adult. We recruited a teacher for the adults. And they get the same curriculum. I give them the lesson every week. Yeah, they're in our teaching, yes.
Are they alone with the kids?
Are we talking about the youth or the adults?
Youth.
Youth. I'm the primary instructor, and then our pastors also teach, and we rotate through. So our setup is we have the den for our youth. It's an area that has multiple rooms, and our safe child policy calls for 2 adults in the same area. And so the high school group is in the next room over right next to us. We share a door, and we feel that meets those needs. Yeah, good question. Yes? Sure.
Youth group.
Sure.
To help us to tailor against
Absolutely.
what you have.
Thank you. Yes. So St. Andrew has about 600 members. We have how many youth this year, Stephanie?
On the roster, we have 18 to 20.
18 to 20 youth.
Probably 12 to 15 are active, which
12
is
to
a good number.
15 in the youth group every week. Yeah. And our confirmation class this year has 6 young people, 3 8th graders, 1 7th grader, and 2 6th graders. So
Also active in Sunday school, because we find that they either do one or the
yes,
other.
we have that crowd as well that doesn't come on Sunday morning. The high school Sunday school class is much smaller than the youth group. Our confirmation class has almost everyone in that age group in it because the parents want their kids to be confirmed, I would say, is the motivation there. Yeah. Great questions. Anything else? Yes.
Has this caused your church to look at their adult membership process? Or how does that, like, I guess I always compare the two together and I get really frustrated that, like, the adults come for like an hour, a couple Sundays, and then we're like, great, you should join the church. And then the kids, we make them jump for all these hoops.
Yes, and the young person that doesn't join as a youth, well, they can just walk in as an 18-year-old. Yes. I don't have an answer. Yes, we do a 4-week adult, we call it inquirers, right? Yes. And they cover all these topics just much more condensed. Yeah. That's what we do. Yeah, I think we could look at it. We can talk about it. Anything else? Okay.
When are you making your curriculum available?
It's got to be done first. I'm still in process. Yeah.
Two curriculum from our denomination. Big God, Big Question.
Yes.
Is the first one. And the thing I like about that is it has journals. And we found after doing it a while that we gave the mentor a journal and the youth a journal as they work together.
What was our online question? She said Big God. Oh, Christy had an online question. I want to make sure we get to that too.
Big God, Big Questions.
Yeah.
The other one, I don't know what the name is, but it's the one that Mark Hines has worked on.
The mission, is that the mission-focused one?
Mission-focused one,
Yeah.
right.
I
Which
would
is a good follow-up to Big God, Big
We just gotta
Questions.
make sure we get those doctrines and beliefs that Big God would cover.
Exactly, that's why I
Yeah.
like it. The one other thing that I would recommend, so often with confirmation, we end up giving them this award Bible type thing at the end of it. We give our confirmands at their commissioning service study Bibles.
Right.
That they will use. And we say, and they begin using them today.
Yes, thank you. What was our online question?
Okay, it was kind of back to the visiting faith communities, and it was about, do you have ideas, or does anybody have ideas of how to make those connections when sometimes you feel like you're parachuting into a faith community? So that was that question. And I don't know
So
if
people who aren't, I'm trying to,
like ideas about how to make that connection when
they're not from the faith tradition. The parent class has really helped, at least in our context, with that, because the parents that have not gone for confirmation cannot relate to what their children are doing, are getting the same context there. I'm going to have more here than we can talk about in 2 minutes, so I'll just quick glide through these. So please remember, this is what I want to leave you, the main idea here, a distinct moment in an unfolding journey of faith. Please don't make confirmation a standalone event that culminates in membership and then we don't ever think about them again. That mentorship, that relationship has to grow before confirmation, through confirmation, and beyond. Elizabeth Caldwell has a great quote where she says, why are confirmation certificates and baptism certificates great for framing? What about what they do afterwards? Isn't that worth framing as well? That's why the frames are up there. And Rick Osmer says that the identification of confirmation and catechetical instruction renders confirmation little more than an agency of socialization in the church. This is a harsh statement, but it creates a structure of expectation, making it highly likely that young people will be confirmed when they have finished their confirmation class. So I urge you to try to fight back against that. Help these young people to own their faith, to grow into their faith. If you can separate it and offer the young people a way to choose when they get to join, maybe you have just an ongoing youth membership class like the adult class we were just mentioning happens for 4 weeks. They've gone through confirmation, they've been baptized. When they're ready, they can do that next step of professing their faith. It will work for some, it won't for others. We worry about losing them. Never have them joining the church. These are real things to think about. So a lot to ponder here. I'm going to leave you, real quick, I'm going to leave you with confirmation should open doors to life's journey. The confirmation process should require commitment and serious focus, but we should not let it become that single mountaintop experience. Okay? Thank you for sharing this time. If you need to buzz out, I completely understand. If you would like to ask questions, let's go ahead and do that too. I had a hand up in the back. We'll just keep going, but those of you who need to leave, I completely understand if you want to go on your way. I will send all of the materials out to all of the email addresses, whether you want them or not. You'll have them and the slides. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Thank you for this attention to something that I think is really important and important for us to think about and move forward. Thank you. Thank you. Questions?
Okay, is it on? Okay. So in the beginning, when we were thinking about like what stood out to us in our own confirmation processes, one of mine was my relationship that I had with my confirmation partner. And I was confirmed about 10 years ago, and we still talk every week. So we're still super close. But something in our church that we're experiencing is elders in the church, or just adults in general, don't really want to have a connection with the youth. So do you have any ideas as to how we could go about that?
I think that's a culture and an education issue. So you need to get your pastors on board with creating a culture where we are in relationship with all ages and educate why it's important. Show them some of this data. Show, if these older generations want their churches to continue, they have to invest in their young people. But it's going to take more than you just telling them that. Take some of this data that's going to be in my slides, or look up those resources and take it and try to get a team behind you to help advocate for that. Let's take some boots on the ground.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck. That's hard. Anyone else have a question? Do you mind? Thank you. Passing the mic back.
It's not a question, just a couple comments.
Sure.
The first, I'm wondering if instead of confirmation, we can, the stage before that, we can call it affirmation. That goes very much with our, the book of confession and so on.
I think it would be wonderful to change the process name away from confirmation. I love affirmation. I love it. Yes, because it helps focus that confirmation is that moment when you join the church, as our polity says.
Yes, and I get it. And I like the frame that you put, because I know some young kids that went through confirmation, But then if they didn't decide to join the church,
Mm-hmm.
they felt like,
Yeah.
without belonging. So I'm
Exactly.
wondering if the church actually can give a certificate of you have done this, but actually recognize that this person has gone through all this process instead of
Right. Affirm.
just leave it
yes.
like that. Affirmation, yeah.
Affirmation,
Again,
a
affirm the
celebration.
person
Yeah.
that belongs.
I think
the-
that if that works in your context, it's a great thing. Yeah, thank you. I think we're going to need to let this room get switched over. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of the conference.